Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's wrap up week 17 with Silmarillion Saturday. Now, these Saturdays are our chance to revisit the history and legends of the Elder Days, whether they come from the Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, or more. Now, we've been bouncing around the First Age for the last 16 weeks, wrapping up the last series with Of the Coming of Men into the West. But to start this third series, I want to go back to my favorite First Age piñata, Fëanor. So I'll be doing the next two Silmarillion Saturdays on Of Fëanor and the Unchaining of Melkor. Now the three kindreds of the Eldar were gathered at last in Valinor, and Melkor was chained. This was the noontide of the Blessed Realm, the fullness of its glory and its bliss, long in tale of years, but in memory too brief. In those days the Eldar became full-grown in stature of body and of mind, and the Noldor advanced ever in skill and knowledge, and the long years were filled with their joyful labors, in which many new things fair and wonderful were devised. Then it was that the Noldor first bethought them of letters, and Rhumil of Tirion was the name of the lore-master who first achieved fitting signs for the recording of speech and song, some for graving upon metal or in stone, others for drawing with brush or with pen. In that time was born in Eldamar, in the house of the king in Tirion upon the crown of Tuna, the eldest of the sons of Finwë, and the most beloved. Curu Finwë was his name, but by his mother he was called Fëanor, spirit of fire, and thus he is remembered in all the tales of the Noldor. Miriel was the name of his mother, who was called Serinde because of her surpassing skill in weaving and needlework, for her hands were more skilled to fineness than any hands even among the Noldor. The love of Finwë and Miriel was great and glad, for it began in the blessed realm in the days of bliss. But in the bearing of her son, Miriel was consumed in spirit and body, and after his birth she yearned for release from the labor of living. And when she had named him, she said to Finwë, "Never again shall I bear child, for strength that would have nourished the life of many has gone forth into Fëanor." Then Finwë was grieved, for the Noldor were in the youth of their days, and he desired to bring forth many children into the bliss of Aman. And he said, "Surely there is healing in Aman. Here all weariness can find rest." But when Miriel languished still, Finwë sought the counsel of Manwë, and Manwë delivered her to the care of Irmo in Lorien. At their parting, for a little while, as he thought, Finwë was sad, for it seemed an unhappy chance that the mother should depart and miss the beginning at least of the childhood days of her son. "It is indeed unhappy," said Miriel, "and I would weep if I were not so weary. But hold me blameless in this, and in all that may come after." She went then to the gardens of Lorien and lay down to sleep. But though she seemed to sleep, her spirit indeed departed from her body and passed in silence to the halls of Mandos. The maidens of Este tended the body of Miriel, and it remained unwithered. But she did not return. Then Finwë lived in sorrow, and he went often to the gardens of Lorien, and sitting beneath the silver willows beside the body of his wife, he called her by her names. But it was unavailing, and alone in all the blessed realm, he was deprived of joy. After a while, he went to Lorien no more. All his love he gave thereafter to his son, and Fëanor grew swiftly, as if a secret fire were kindled within him. He was tall and fair of face and masterful, his eyes piercingly bright, and his hair raven dark, in the pursuit of all his purposes, eager and steadfast. Few ever changed his courses by counsel, none by force. He became of all the Noldor, then or after, the most subtle in mind and the most skilled in hand. In his youth, bettering the work of Rhumil, he devised those letters which bear his name, and which the Eldar used ever after. And he it was who, first of the Noldor, discovered how gems greater and brighter than those of the earth might be made with skill. The first gems that Fëanor made were white and colorless, but being set under starlight, They would blaze with blue and silver fires brighter than Helluin, and other crystals he made also, wherein things far away could be seen small but clear, as with the eyes of the eagles of Manwë. Seldom were the hands and mind of Fëanor at rest. Now let's talk a little bit about second marriage. Debated among the Valar, Finwë wanted more kids, so he wanted to be remarried. But marriage was forever because a Fëa could return from Mandos. Now, a decision was made that if the Fëa in Mandos, in this case Miriel, agreed, the still living elf could remarry. But then the Fëa in Mandos would be doomed to remain there until the end of Arda. Now, in the debate among the Valar in the Statute of Finwë and Miriel, Manwë makes an excellent distinction between healing and justice. He says, "In this matter ye must not forget that you deal with Arda Mard, out of which ye brought the Eldar. Neither must ye forget that in Arda Mard justice is not healing. Healing cometh only by suffering and patience, and maketh no demand, not even for justice. Justice works only within the bonds of things as they are, accepting the marring of Arda, and therefore, though justice is itself good, and desireth no further evil, it can but perpetuate the evil that was, and doth not prevent it from the bearing of fruit in sorrow." So, though the statute was just, it still brought sorrow because it had to accept things unintended for Arda, death, and the severance of Finwë and Miriel. Now, speaking of Arda Mard, Yavanna, the wife of Aule, says that the shadow marred the very Hroa of Arda, the very body of Arda, and all Middle-earth is perverted by the evil of Melkor. None of those who awoke in Middle-earth have come here wholly free, she says. The failing of the strength of the body of Miriel may then be ascribed with some reason to the evil of Arda Mard, and her death be a thing unnatural. Nienna, not surprisingly, urges pity, the consideration of the singleness or uniqueness of each that cometh under justice. She thinks Miriel died by necessity of body, the cost of so great a childbearing. Now she comes down on the side of the statute being a good thing because Finwë, who could not understand death, was bereaved, and his natural life and expectation was impaired. Ulmo argues that though the Fëa of Miriel may have departed in necessity, it also departed with the will not to return. This was entirely her fault, he says. This will was not under compulsion irresistible. It was a failure in hope by the Fëa, acceptance of the weariness and weakness of the body as a thing beyond healing, and which therefore was not healed. Namo, Mandos, reminds them that it is their task to deal with Arda Mard and to declare what is just within it. He says, "We may indeed in council point to the higher road, Miriel not despairing of life, Finwë being more patient, but we cannot make any free creature to walk upon it. That leadeth to tyranny, which disfigureth good and maketh it seem hateful. Healing by final hope is a law which one can give to oneself only. Of others, justice alone can be demanded." Wow. Then he issues his great prophecy. He says, "Hearken now, O Valar, to me foretelling is granted no less than doom, and I will proclaim now to you things both near and far. Behold, Indus the fair shall be made glad and fruitful, who might else have been solitary. For not in death only hath the shadow entered into Aman with the coming of the children destined to suffer. There are other sorrows, even if they be less. Long she hath loved Finwë, in patience and without bitterness. Aule nameth Fëanor the greatest of the Eldar, and in potency that is true. But I say unto you that the children of Indus shall also be great, and the tale of Arda more glorious because of their coming. And from them shall spring things so fair that no tears shall dim their beauty, in whose being the Valar and the kindreds both of elves and of men that are to come shall all have part, and in whose deeds they shall rejoice. So that long hence, when all that here is and seemeth yet fair and impregnable shall none the less have faded and passed away, the light of Aman shall not wholly cease among the free peoples of Arda until the end." Now that's beautiful, but of course it doesn't end there. It actually ends in a pretty bittersweet way. Later on in the Flight of the Noldor, we learn that Finwë dies. When we read about that in Morgoth's Ring, we are told that after Finwë's death, he meets Miriel in the halls of Mandos. She acknowledges her error in not returning. She then expresses a desire to set all the tale of our people and of thee and thy children in a tapestry of many colors as a memorial brighter than memory. She does this as she feels again the call of her body and its skills. Now, Finwë, what a man here. He goes to the Valar. He offers to live with Mandos forever. In other words, to not be rebodied, so that Miriel's Fëa can be reunited with her Hroa. At this point, Indis has returned to her own people. Now, Miriel ends up going to the house of Vaire, the Weaver, and she becomes her chief handmaid. And all tidings of the Noldor down the years from their beginning were brought to her, and she wove them in webs historial, so fair and skilled that they seem to live, imperishable, shining with a light of many hues, fairer than are known in Middle-earth. This labor, Finwë is at times permitted to look upon. Well, that does it for this week's Silmarillion Saturday and for week 17 of today's Tolkien Times. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout with me, and a bonus weekly episode. So this week really isn't done if you're part of that. Now, folks, if you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps and follow @Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Finally, as Fëanor says, go with the goodwill of all good men.